Hello, everyone. My name is Leo Balambao, and I'm a minister's assistant at the Buddhist Church of San Francisco. Welcome to the July 26th Sangha service. Today would have been our Ginza Bazaar and tomorrow our One Festival. But due to COVID, it has become a virtual festival this year. By the time this video is aired, we would have had our virtual release of our Obon festivities, which was released yesterday at 1 p.m. Please go to our channel to view that festival, our virtual celebration. Please join me in Gassho. From the Jodo Wasan of Shinran Shonin. The light of wisdom exceeds all measure, and every finite living being receives the illumination that is like the dawn. So take refuge in Amida, the true and real light. Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu, Namanda, Namanda, Namanda Butsu. Since we went into shelter in place, I try to get outside and take a walk at least once a day in my neighborhood. I'm very fortunate to live near the Presidio and also Mountain Lake Park, and I've been enjoying discovering new trails that are just within a few minutes of my apartment. These walks help break up the day since I'm also lucky to be working from home. I leave the house with the intention of appreciating the natural surroundings and cultivating gratitude. But often I find myself becoming, well, maybe a bit annoyed, maybe even angry at times. I like to think that I'm a responsible citizen, so I always leave the house with a face covering or a mask. And if I'm on an aggressive hike or a bike ride, I'll wear a gaiter that I can pull up or down if I approach others. But often I see people exercising with no face mask, which I suppose is okay if you're maintaining physical distance. But I've had people walk or run right up to me with no face covering, breathing heavily. And this really angers me when I see this happen to our senior citizens. Racist behavior and language is another thing that angers me. It seems like almost weekly that a person acting or saying racist things is caught on camera, and the video posted to social media, the modern method of public shaming. The thought of shaming someone has crossed my mind, but is shaming really the answer to these complex issues? I recently read an article regarding mask wearing compliance that suggested instead of shaming people, we should appeal to people on a personal level. Explain that you, someone you live with or take care of, is in a high risk group, and that the simple act of wearing a face covering isn't a sign of weakness or acquiescence to the powers that be, but rather an act of kindness and concern for self and others. Yelling at someone to put on a mask isn't likely to change behavior. In fact, it's more likely that the person will become angry and entrenched. Many of you know that I love the work of Brené Brown, and it's because I believe her work on shame, empathy, and courage are so needed at this juncture in American life. She believes that shame is not an effective tool for social change. Shame is egocentric and self-involved. Cultivating empathy is more effective. Empathy is outwardly focused. Brown defines shame as the following: the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love, belonging, and connection. And she explains shame in the following way. Shame is, I am bad. Guilt is, I did something bad. When we shame someone, we turn them into that thing we wish to change. It becomes part of their identity. You're a racist. You're a homophobe. It doesn't allow for the possibility of growth or change. In her research, Brown has found that some people are more easily sense shame and others guilt. Those in the shame camp are prone to addiction, violence, and bullying. On the other hand, those who have a healthy sense of guilt have greater protection from developing these issues. I said something insensitive, that's guilt. I am insensitive, that's shame. And that shame makes you feel unworthy of love, belonging, and connection. Shame can also prevent us from having constructive conversations we need to have to produce positive social change. It takes courage to have these conversations. And if we fear falling into shame or being shamed, those conversations never begin. I know I harbor biases, both conscious and unconscious, and yes, though I hate to admit it, racist thoughts. The light of wisdom exposes them to me. The heart of compassion urges me forward to face them. In conversation, I know I'm going to get things wrong sometimes, make missteps. It's up to me to stay out of shame, be held accountable, and grow, learn, and unlearn. Brene Brown has a really good mantra for this. I'm here to get it right. I'm not here to be right. I'm here to get it right. I'm not here to be right. About a year ago, I was invited by my friend to attend a temporary art installation in Oakland. The artists were all African-American women, and the art was multimedia and experiential. It spoke to the Black female experience. After the artists spoke about their art, there was a roundtable discussion where people could ask questions and shared at that time. I have to tell you, as a male and a non-African-American, I was a bit intimidated to engage for fear of making a patriarchal or racist misstep. And if I'm being completely honest, I was a little out of my comfort zone. So I smiled a lot and I observed, but what I learned that day has stayed with me since. There's a collective of African-American women who sleep for their community. Yes, sleep. They assign different nights to the members to sleep with the intention for their suffering communities. Why sleep? Sleep deprivation was a tool used by slave owners as a form of social control over the slaves. Slaves were sent to work sleep deprived, and if you've ever seen old black and white movies, you're well aware of the caricature of a stumbling, sleepy, lazy, incoherent slave. The effects of sleep deprivation and its portrayal in popular culture gave rise to negative stereotypes of African Americans. It's good to question where our attitudes and assumptions come from. Are they formed in a vacuum, or the crucible of racist society that shames and blames its victims? At this gathering, it was also brought to my attention that economic stress is also tied to sleep deprivation, and that African Americans suffer the highest rates of sleep disturbance in the United States, with the Latinx community following close behind. The women of this collective, in intentionally taking care of themselves by sleeping, are also taking care of their communities. In resting, they can be fully present, genso, echo in Shin terms, coming and going, benefiting oneself while simultaneously benefiting others. Some of these same women randomly show up en masse, dressed all in white, in particular problematic streets and corners in Oakland, to make a powerful statement to stop the violence, stop the suffering. In a recent podcast, Professor Brown encouraged her listeners to read an article by Black feminist, lesbian, and poet Audre Lorde. The title of the article is "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House." This article is written as a critique of the academic feminist movement that at the time mirrored the cultural biases of the community at large. She was invited to speak at a feminist conference in the 1970s with barely enough time to respond to the organizers, and there was very little representation of women of color, working class, poor women, or gay women. I'd like to share a few quotes of that article with you. Difference must not merely be tolerated, but seen as a fund of necessary polarities between which our creativity can spark like a dialectic. Only then does the necessity for interdependency become unthreatening. Only within that interdependency of different strengths, acknowledged and equal, can the power to seek new ways of being in the world generate, as well as the courage and sustenance to act where there are no charters. Interdependence. What we call the oneness of life. For some, that oneness is threatening, not knowing it's the source of our freedom and liberation from suffering. At the end of the article, Lorde makes the following exhortation. Racism and homophobia are real conditions of all our lives in this place and time. I urge each one of us here to reach down into that deep place of knowledge inside herself and touch that terror and loathing of any difference that lives there. See whose face it wears. Then the personal, as the political, can begin to illuminate all our choices. These words written in 1978 are so very relevant today. It can feel good temporarily to shame others for bad behavior, but lasting change comes about in conversation and dialogue. Shame is the instrument of oppression against the oppressed, the master's tool. Accountability, holding each other responsible for our actions, is not shaming. It's a singling out of behavior. You did something bad versus you are bad. And yes, it's okay to be angered. Anger is a signpost that something's not okay. By embracing that anger with care and self-compassion, we can transform it and use it as a point of departure instead of remaining there and creating more suffering for ourselves and others. In closing, I'd like to read part of an article that Professor Alfred Bloom wrote on the occasion of the 750th memorial of Shinran Shonin. Shinran's life is a context for the emergence and history of a powerful vision of Amida Buddha's all-inclusive, universal, and unconditional compassion. This compassion leveled society by attributing value and meaning to the lowliest person, as well as the most powerful and capable. Shinran referred to his followers as equal companions, ondobo ondogyo, in the Dharma. He indicated that no criteria or distinction, gender, social, religious, whatever, can be used to measure shinjin, which means true and trusting our faith. True and trusting is bestowed by Amida Buddha through the power of his primal vow, which promises to bring all sentient beings to enlightenment without exception. It is a vision which is still waiting for people to take seriously. It pertains not only to religion, but also to society and human relations. May we take Shinran's vision and Amida's Hongan seriously, and may we all obtain perfect peace. Please join me in Gassho. The light of wisdom exceeds all measure, and every finite living being receives the illumination that is like the dawn. So take refuge in Amida, the true and real light. Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, Namanda, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu. Thank you. Please join me in the chanting of the Vandana Ti-Sarana. If you have your purple service book at home, it is found on page 167. Namo tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sammasambuddhassa. Homage to him, the Exalted One, the Enlightened One, the Supremely Awakened One. Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhammam Saranam Gacchami, Sangham Saranam Gacchami. I go to the Buddha for guidance. I go to the Dharma for guidance. I go to the Sangha for guidance. Namu Kie Butsu, Namu Kie Ho, Namu Kie So. Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, 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 Namanda Butsu. I'd like to thank the board and the BCSF volunteers that helped to put together our Bon Bento yesterday on Friday. I really appreciated my lunch yesterday and thought of all of you. I'd also like to thank everyone who made our virtual Bon celebration possible. And as always, I'd like to thank Kevin Yoza and Keith Kojimoto for helping produce these videos. We have two announcements. First, our book club continues on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. With Reverend Kobata. And on Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m., our mindful meditation with Sensei Leo Jocelyn is also available via Zoom. If you would like to participate in those Zoom conference calls, please contact our office at BCSF or email them. And this concludes today's Sangha service. Thank you. Namanda, Namanda, Namanda.